Ladies and gentlemen, members of the online and in-person audience, welcome to today's ALN event titled Digital Threads, Connecting Futures with the ALN Academy. My name is Rafael Gitau and I'm your host today. I'm accompanied by Peter.
My name is Peter Mogoba.
Peter, care to introduce yourself?
Yeah. My name is Peter Mogoba, and I'm gonna be one of the MC in this event. And I want to ask you, what do you think digital threads means to you? And
I mean, in the context of this event, digital threads connecting futures with the ALN Academy, I can't help to think about the partnerships that the ALN Academy has had last 6-7 years since its inception in 2018, and this is exactly what this event is about: connecting, and celebrating and reflecting on partnerships, and looking forward, being prospective in what 2025 will bring for the Academy and what it will bring for our various organizations that are represented here. And I mean, I invite you, members of the audience, to do so, to interact, to reflect, to mingle, and in the spirit of engagement, we will be asking periodically questions from members of the audience about what digital threads and connecting futures means to you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's some people I can see here. Rafael, I think you can take charge of that and ask a few questions. I think we can move around, no?
Yeah, so I think we can start with the physical audience. Professor Mile. Yes. I'm sorry to bombard you like this. And I had a question for you. You've interacted with the ALN Academy for a number of years. Tell me what that partnership has meant to you.
The partnership has meant to me a lot. This is one of the best, if not the best, law firm in East Africa, and it has all the reason to be snooty, but it is not. And I very much appreciate and very, very thankful that ALN Academy is always willing to cooperate. Perhaps I should introduce myself. I'm from Kenyatta University. I teach at a public university that faces all the challenges that public universities are facing.
And yet I came from there myself.
Exactly, but we produce brilliant graduates. So I'm very thankful to ALN for absorbing our brilliant graduates. I am sure they add a lot of value, but also for nurturing new talents, for engaging the students, for giving them the opportunity to participate in events, to interact with practitioners, but also to partner with us in organizations of various events. We had a conference here last year in December, an international conference. We were hosted here. It was a great event, bringing together students, scholars, younger generation, the generation which used to be young some time back, like me, and scholars and practitioners. And this space here is a beautiful space, as we can see. It's also a dynamic space, an intellectual hub, a place of engagement on topical issues, and this is what I appreciate very much. And I like coming here. Even within the last 2 weeks, I am here for the third time, so I think I will just move in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we'll also get some views from a guest that I will choose at random. Hi, I'm well. My name is Rafael. I'm an MC for this event.
Hi, Rafael. Hi, Rafael. How are you doing?
I'm well. Just wanted to know what connecting futures and partnering with ALN has meant to you personally.
Great. So ALN Kenya is a member of the Kenya Green Building Society. And so the Kenya Green Building Society, briefly, is a green building council that champions sustainability in the built environment. And we're really proud to have ALN as a member of the Kenya Green Building Society because as a player in the legal space, it means that we have practitioners who understand the importance of our cities as platforms of opportunity or adversity So in that regard, then, partnering with ALN is really about a partnership that understands that if we want to build prosperity from a business perspective, it's also important to look at empowering people. And that means and speaks to dignity in the context of housing, better cities that work for women, youth, and differently abled people. And so for us, really, this collaboration is a friendship that seeks to serve a bigger purpose. And alongside that, of course, we have trainings and capacity building for the market, and seeing how we can leverage ALN's expertise to better serve both the public realm and the private realm. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nasra. Can I call you Nasra? Yeah, you can. Yeah. Thank you so much. Truer words have never been said. And we have such a jam-packed and exciting program for you today, including a webinar today. As you know, we are right off the back of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And just yesterday, we saw demonstrations across the country seeking to end femicide, which is a scourge that has been affecting Kenya and many other societies across the world. And our webinar today regards safeguarding measures against gender-based violence. And we're really looking forward to moving on to that webinar portion of the evening. Is there anything you'd like to add, Pete?
You know, I learned a fun fact. On the gender-based violence, fun fact, yeah? 1 in 3 women worldwide experience of physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. So LGBTQ individuals also face heightened risk of GBV due to stigma and discrimination. And do you think this is creating an impact in our society?
Listen, Pete, I don't want to take away from the webinar today. I'm sure there are very many views here. I mean, it's a very pertinent and a very timely topic that we're discussing today. And I think it's important that we have it now, if not sooner than today, because, you know, femicide, gender-based violence, all of that, I mean, how can we as Africa progress? How can we leverage on our potential? Which again goes back to ALN Academy's vision, right? Rule of law and good governance issues, trying to leverage the best and, you know, the highest potential from Africa. And I just think that some of these conversations are intertwined, completely intertwined around, you know, how we treat women, how we treat, you know, how gender-based violence, you know, plays a part in all that. And it's just important that we talk about this today. Yeah.
And again, this is what we have in store for you. You cannot afford to miss this conversation at all. And we encourage our online viewers just continue engaging with us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and feel free to reach out to me and my MC so that we can answer your questions. And also, one thing about digital threads is, I think Africa in general has potential. Africa in general has potential to grow in terms of technology, in terms of innovation, having different initiatives to be better. However, I don't think we are using that potential that we have. We are giving it to the outside. But I would love for the youth in Africa generally to keep that potential in Africa and innovate Africa as a whole. Let's try as much as we can to connect each and every part of Africa. Do you think you are utilizing our potential really?
I mean, these are some of the conversations that we have here at the ALN Academy. And I mean, our partners know this. We talk about so many things: youth, you know, ESG, navigating security, finance, so on and so forth, all within the context of inter-African trade. We talk about so much here. And I think also just thinking about, you know, reflecting on our partnerships over the years, and also an important part of today's program is, you know, launching our strategies for 2025. And we have so much to look for ourselves at the ALN Academy, and I'm sure you also have a lot to look for our partners online. And yeah, so really looking forward to engaging with you on this. And I mean, this is the start of, I'm sure, a fruitful and continuous partnership between us and you. Yeah.
Do you think we have room for one more guest to speak?
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
of course. I
We
mean,
can- yeah.
guest of your choice, I think.
I think we'll go with the professor from KU. I think
No,
she's
I mean,
Mary.
yeah,
Mary?
yeah,
Mary?
of course. Yeah.
Excuse me. I'd like to speak to you, please. So, yeah. Could you... And we have one of our lovely guests. She's Emily. Emily, how are you doing?
I'm very fine, thank you.
She's, where are you from? Would you beg to introduce yourself, please?
My name is Emily Mulinya. I'm a lecturer at Kenyatta University School of Law. I teach criminal law. And he's my very, very good student. I taught him, and I can tell you, yeah, I was just saying, Raf he was my very good student, very diligent, yeah, and hardworking. Yeah, so I teach there.
Ralph, could you please be part of this conversation? What's the most interesting thing you learned about her? The most interesting thing she taught you, rather?
I mean, she taught me a lot. Criminal law, for instance. Yeah. I mean, it's been many years we've known each other, and I'm just happy that we're reconnecting in this way. I mean, again, connecting futures. Yeah. Connecting the past, connecting futures, right? So we go way back, and yeah. Thank you so much. We're happy to have you here.
In fact, I'm very happy. I was so happy to see him here.
Yeah.
I was so delighted, yeah. And I just wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Yeah. All right.
One more question. What has attracted to you to ALN Academy?
Actually, Prof just told me about it.
Yeah.
When was it? Yesterday? And I was like, yeah, why can't I just come and see what usually happens?
Yeah.
And here I am, and I'm glad, and I really want to, engage in the discussion so that we can look at areas that we can, do research as scholars and all that.
Yeah. I love for Ralph to tell you about what we in ALN Academy do, just to brief you about the general objective and goals of ALN.
Yeah, I mean, we always welcome new partnerships, and Miss Mulinya, I'm happy to see you here, and I'm sure we'll have many guests who are unfamiliar or barely familiar with the ALN Academy, and we are the premier not-for-profit organization dealing in rule of law and governance issues. We are housed within ALN Kenya, which is also the premier law firm within the country and part of a much larger African network of law firms. And what we do is essentially we foster thought leadership on issues affecting Africa. So think the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we talk about that. We've talked about that in the last couple of months. We've talked about the protests that happened in June. We're now talking about gender-based violence. We've talked about ESGs, environmental social governance, and all of that is just a snapshot of what we deal in here at the ALN Academy. And if you can see the diversity of our partners who are present here today, and even in the webinars you'll soon meet them, we are very diverse in what we are interested in, but we are also singular in our focus, in the sense that all we do is Africa-centered, Africa-focused. So, yeah, that's that. And members of the online audience, for those who are familiar with ALN, that's your takeaway. We're Africa-centered, Africa-focused. All right.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, Ralph, as we continue this conversation, I think you've done an outstanding job selling us out. and I commend you incredibly for that. Just one last thing. What are you planning to take out of this whole event?
I mean, I can't spoil it for the for I mean, I've always had valuable takeaways from any ALN event, but I think I take this one particularly close to the heart, given how timely it is, and just the issues that are affecting the country. I mean, it's very easy to put that in the back burner, but being part of a platform, or be part of a group or an academy that talks about these issues as they come and when they come, and tries to stress them and tries to bring them out in the best way possible, is something that I'm proud to be part of. And I don't know what I'll take away from this event, but I am like a sponge. I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to experience all that, and I hope the audience feels the same way. Yeah.
I need to make more connections. Now, over to you, Raf.
All right. Well, so I mean, all members of the online audience, I would invite you to a cup of tea. Please feel free to take a cup of tea in your homes. Members of the physical audience, feel free to get a cup of tea. I see Emmanuel there. Come, there's tea here for you and a few bitings. Yeah. And yeah, so really looking forward to this. In a few minutes, we're gonna switch over to the webinar portion of the evening. And I think, well, with Rebecca's permission, you'll let us know when that is ready to start. In 5 minutes. All right. So yeah, please, Memgo. Yeah, I think now we'll pan out to members of the audience, of course. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Don't have anything else to say. Yeah. All right.
Willie and Sisanda, are they online?
Hello, online viewers. My name is Peter Mogoba. I'm part of the ALN Academy team, and together with me, I have.
Khairan Noor, an international sports law consultant.
So this is just a normal fireside conversation that we are going to have. And tell me more about sports consulting.
Well, first of all, sports law is one of, I would say, emerging areas of specialization in law, although not unique in the sense that from the word it sounds, because it cuts across all aspects of, I would say, foundations of law. So you have contracts, you have dispute resolution, you have IP law, there's tort law, etc. So as one of the areas that I would say is picking up interest, I mean, Kenya is known for its sports prowess, although we still are lagging behind when it comes to governance regulations and legal framework when it comes to sports law, how it's run, how it's managed, athletes' rights, how governing bodies are functioning when it comes to good governance, especially with basically one, I would say, legal framework, accountability and transparency in how things are managed, financial I would say accountability as well. So I would say those are one of the areas or some of the areas that would be covered with a sports law framework or legislative framework.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I believe you partnered with ALN Academy.
Yes. Oh, it's not working. Yes.
You did partner. How was your experience?
I would say it was a very good experience, positive. Thanks to Miss Aisha, who was very receptive, and from the get-go, she was happy to do it, and she picked it up, unlike, other stakeholders would maybe take you around. But I think that's one of the things I would give ALN, is that they're always receptive when it comes to new and emerging areas of law, partnering with people who, have interesting initiatives and would like to work with them. So I'd give them that they've been very receptive, they've been very welcoming, and I would say generous, because they also hosted us here in both of the events. Yeah.
Do you mind telling us about this particular project?
Yes. So one of them was, I would say, what was it? Both were around sports law. So the first one that we did was in partnership with East African Law Society. I chaired the sports law committee of the ELS. So we had a sports dispute resolution panel, and the other one was I don't remember the title of it, but it was just basically talking about sports law, what areas around sports law, and how can students or lawyers tap into the market. So looking at the different facets and identifying the other areas of opportunities around sports law. Yeah.
Now, how do you think other lawyers can tap into the market?
I think there are different ways you can do it. Of course, the most obvious channel would be through academic specialization. So you can either do a master's, you can do a diploma in and around sports law studies, or maybe a certificate program. But then the other ways would be maybe helping with the sports dispute tribunal, maybe as the pro bono panel. So you can be exposed to the sports law practice. You can work for sports governing bodies. You can be a consultant like myself on different areas, could be governance, safeguarding, policy frameworks, maybe diversity and inclusion in sports. And of course now some of the areas that we're also seeing happening at the moment is gender abuse of athletes in Kenya and globally. But I would say the ones that come to mind at the moment would be those ones, yeah.
So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate for that chit-chat that we have had.
Yeah.
Now to the next program, I would like to welcome Rutendo.
Afternoon, everyone, once again. Welcome back to another webinar by ALN Academy and our end of year partnership appreciation event. We're really excited to have you here once more, and we have a very timely, very exciting topic, and one that is especially important now on safeguarding mechanisms for gender-based violence, and a lovely lineup of speakers. Before we get into the speakers and who they are, we're just going to have an introduction from our wonderful director of ALN Academy and the head of disputes at Africa Legal Network, Aisha Abdallah, who is so many accolades, and is duly qualified as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a solicitor of England and Wales. Aisha has been nominated by the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce to the board of the Nairobi Center for International Arbitration in 2021. She specializes in economic crime, is a member of IBA Asset Recovery Committee, and passionate about the rule of law and the impact of quality legal training. So we're very, very excited to hear an introduction from Aisha. Welcome, Aisha.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rutendo. It's very embarrassing to sit and listen to Rutendo introduce me because we've done so many events together during the year. So welcome to our last ALN Academy event. I understand we have people online joining us, so welcome as well. This event is called Digital Threads Connecting Futures, and it will have two parts. So first, I'll have my fellow partner, Luisa Cetina. She's going to lead a discussion around sexual harassment and safeguarding issues. So that will be a panel discussion, and then we're going to invite our in-person audience to remain behind because we're going to do a sort of a wrap-up for the year where we'll have one of our other directors, Karim Anjarwalla, summarizing the work we've done this year and thanking the people who've supported us and giving you some of the flavor of what we intend to do next year. So I just wanted to briefly explain what the ALN Academy is. ALN Academy is set up as a charity. It's set up in Mauritius, and it promotes the rule of law in Africa in two main ways. It provides capacity building for government lawyers, and it provides legal education, training, and awareness raising for law students and private practitioners. And we work with a number of different partners. So we have some academic partners, some of whom are in the room today with us. And we also work with international NGOs. We work with local partners, and we work with donors. And we work with anyone who really has a sustained interest in Africa. If Africa is of interest to you and you have a long-term commitment, it is probably likely that we'll find areas that we can collaborate with. So I'd like to begin by welcoming Luisa Cetina to the stage and asking her to introduce her panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. So Luisa is going to be our moderator today. Luisa is a distinguished legal expert in cross-border disputes, arbitration, and crisis management, with a track record of handling complex, multi-jurisdictional cases. Luisa is a key member of the Dispute Resolution, Forensics and Investigations team at ALN Kenya and plays a pivotal role in ensuring accountability and safeguarding within corporate, trade, and legal frameworks. Luisa brings a unique perspective on how cross-border legal tools can be leveraged to ensure justice for gender-based violence survivors and strengthening safeguarding policies across Africa. Welcome, Luisa, as our moderator. Then we are joined by two lovely speakers in person today. Bina Maseno is a founder and executive director of Badili Africa, and she specializes in gender democracy, youth leadership, and civic engagement. She is a trailblazer in advancing gender democracy, youth leadership, and civic education, with a particular focus on empowering women and girls in vulnerable communities. As the founder and director of Badili, Bina leads transformative efforts to strengthen leadership and safeguarding capacity for women and girls in informal settlements. Welcome, Bina. In person, we also have with us Maurine Adhiambo, who is a finance and administrative officer and a champion for financial and empowerment of women. Financial empowerment and safeguarding of women. She's a passionate advocate for financial empowerment as a tool for safeguarding against gender-based violence, and has a strong foundation in finance and administration, which she currently uses those skills at Uraia Trust while pursuing a Master of Science in Finance at the University of Nairobi. Welcome, Maurine. And online, we have two very dynamic speakers. We have with us Sisanda Nkoala, who is the Associate Professor of Media Ethics and Representation at the University of the Western Cape. Dr. Nkoala is an Associate Professor of Linguistics and Media Studies as well at UWC, where she serves as the Chair of UWC's Media Inclusion and Diversity Initiatives. She's also a former award-winning journalist whose research and advocacy focuses on how media narratives shape public perceptions of social justice issues, in particular gender-based violence. And so Sisanda will be joining us online. And last but not least, Willie Oelofse. Willie Oelofse is a leading expert in forensic investigation, risk management, and corporate safeguarding, with over 25 years of experience advising multinational corporations and public sector bodies. And we welcome Willie as our Director of Forensics Risk and Compliance at ALN Kenya. So welcome. Luisa will now take over and moderate our wonderful panel. Thanks, Luisa.
Thank you very much, Rutendo. Hi, everyone. Welcome to ALN House. We're very happy to have you here. I understand that this is actually a closing event of the Academy. I wasn't aware of this, but it makes a lot of sense since it's already the end of the year, almost 2025. We're here to discuss a tough topic, one that I think Rafael mentioned during his live interviews is a global scourge and has an impact in pretty much every country. In some regions, it's more significant than in others, and that is gender-based violence and what can be done through a whole society approach to address the problem. So according to global statistics, 1 in 3 women report being subjected to gender-based violence of some form of another, and that's taking into account a wide definition, whether it's mental, emotional violence or actual physical violence, abuse, beatings, rape, and so in Africa, unfortunately, from a statistical standpoint, the numbers are even starker, with reporting of 44% of women being subjected to gender-based violence on average. And in certain regions, especially where we're talking about regions with conflict scenarios, refugees, etc., the numbers are a lot scarier than that. There is persistence, as you've seen from the situation in Kenya. From the latest reports I've seen, almost 100 women have been killed in Kenya since August. That's only 4 months, right? Something like 96 women. In the area of sports, we've seen very well-known female athletes killed by their partners, and that just highlights the issue. Yesterday, a number of people, both men and women, were protesting, trying to just fight the stigma and encourage mobilization of society to fight GBV. And yet, they were subjected to violence themselves, which is really quite ironic. It's been interesting, if you Google actually the protest yesterday, every single major international media outlet has reported on it, and it uses language that is really quite critical of the Kenya response. A lot of them, if you look at the headlines, refer to police hurling tear gas at the protesters. So they use violent language in doing the reporting. So there were critical gaps in safeguarding. We'll address safeguarding from our perspective. as a law firm, a corporate law firm, we often come in, and Willie will speak to this, from the perspective of assisting organizations with internal compliance or responding by way of an internal investigation and then recommendations on how to fix policies and internal measures, whistleblowing, etc. But there are other wider systemic issues, weak legislative frameworks. There are cultural norms that are entrenched and that normalize violence. And there are narratives that are quite pervasive. So we need to look at ways of encouraging a varied set of segments or varied segments within society to address the issue in innovative ways sometimes, ideally leveraging technology and continuing to push the agenda from a grassroots level perspective. So why do we need to address this in such an urgent way? One, there are a lot of obviously negative impacts that result from costs to society, resulting from both economic and social costs, whether it's from a healthcare standpoint, from a productivity standpoint, from a mental wellness standpoint, legal expenses, and so forth. There's a digital divide. If you look at the figures regarding access, for example, to the internet, only about 1 woman in 4 in Africa accesses the internet regularly. For men, it's about a little above 1 in 3. So that has impacts in terms of education, in terms of understanding what to do to protect yourself and mitigate the risk, and in terms of reporting. And obviously conflict and crisis hotspots. Unfortunately, in East Africa, we're surrounded by a lot of countries that are in conflict scenarios. Also, we're still recovering from the impacts of the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, the lockdowns had an increase in gender-based violence and an increase in consumption of alcohol, which often then leads to violence of this type. I was looking at some of the statistics for South Africa, and the number of murders of actually children and women in the first few weeks after lockdown was just really extraordinary. So there's an elevated urgency in terms of solutions. This is an issue that has sort of been in the consciousness of people in the region. If you look at surveys of citizens of African countries regarding whether they see this as a problem, they say yes, resoundingly, men and women. Interestingly, though, when they're asked as to what the response should be and whether this should be criminalized or should be considered as a private family matter, for example, when we look at domestic violence, then the situation is a little bit different. It depends per region, but oftentimes the answer is actually this is just a family private matter. So a lot needs to be done. We're going to spotlight some of these issues. We have experts on the panel that are actually quite diverse, and so I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with them from their perspective. On the one hand, we have Bina, who really has a lot of experience in the political sector, grassroots movements and activism. Maurine on financial inclusion. Willie on how to deal with compliance, safeguarding measures, and dealing with the issue from a policy and organizational standpoint and what that can do. And Sisanda, very interestingly, from the perspective of the stories we tell ourselves and we tell society through the media and the impact that that has. So without further ado, I will sit with my panel and we can start the discussions. Bina, I'd like to start with you just because of how salient or how recent the protests that have been portrayed in the media are and the response to that. And I'd be keen to know from your perspective, what is the role that activism of this type has to play in preventing and mitigating risk of gender-based violence? And when you look at the reaction of the police to the individuals who were protesting, men and women, what you would say about safeguarding measures because when someone is deciding that morning whether to leave the door and join these grassroots movements, they have to think about personal security and safety as well.
Thank you very much. As I had, my name is Bina Maseno from Badili Africa. So thank you for that question. So first of all, yesterday was a very sad day because we got to town at around 9 together with a few of my colleagues to join the protest. And I think being the last day for 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and seeing the state respond with violence within the 16 days of activism, and you're responding with violence, the assault, even how they dealt with the majority of the protesters who were there, the tear gassing. I think that's a very sad state of affair, that you're protesting your right to remain alive. You're protesting to protect your right, because I think the Bill of Rights, Article 29, talks about freedom and security. And currently, you did allude to the fact that just within the first 4 months, we've lost about 100 women. And those are the women who've been reported. Majority of the women who die in the hands of their intimate partners never even make it to the news. Just this year alone, from January, we're talking about 200 cases. And if you aggregate from 2017, data shows that we have lost about 500 women, right? So there's that. So we have to continue pushing the government. Number one, I think recently there was a petition to Parliament to declare femicide and gender-based violence a national disaster because it is. And I think it's the fact that we normalize gender-based violence so much that even the political class does not even take it seriously. And I'm saying they don't even take it seriously because even when they campaign, it's never even one of their agendas. It's never been in their manifesto, you know? As a community activist, I track even the manifestos of the political leaders, and you won't even hear your own member of county assembly, your own member of parliament, will not even talk about safety, that if you elect me, I'll ensure that there's safety for you, right? But then it's also sometimes the lack of understanding of the implications of that has to be part of the advocacy that we have to continue pushing. It's the economic implication of that, right? The Kenyan government spends about 46 billion to respond to gender-based violence in this country, whether it's the psychosocial support in hospitals, but 46 billion, that's resource that could be channeled to other important sectors in a country where about 60% of young people are unemployed. The bare minimum a survivor spends on medical care after you've been assaulted is 16,000, bare minimum. And you haven't even spoken about the psychosocial support, the fact that you can't even go to work sometimes when you're assaulted, if at all you make it alive, that is. So there's so many areas of advocacy we have to keep on pushing for, but then also to strengthen, to push for justice as well. So my area mainly has been in the political arena, and also working even with political parties to ensure that they even have the policies, because also many political parties don't even have the sexual harassment policies, you know? So even when you're assaulted and you go back to your political party, what are you anchoring that on? You see? So there's so much to do. The lack of political goodwill, normalization of gender-based violence, expecting survivors to be the ones to push for justice, while sometimes we stand on the sidelines, you know? And also looking at this as a female issue, while it is a societal issue. It's just not a female issue, yeah? So there's still so much that we have to push for, and we can't stop. Thanks.
Thanks, Bina. So where do you see the trajectory? Have you seen, during your activism in this space, have you seen progress, or have you seen some stallment? I was looking at a report that actually shockingly suggests that in some countries, including East Africa, some of the younger women are responding to questions, agreeing that it is all right for men to discipline women through violence. So it's not actually a decreasing trend. In some areas, it's an increasing trend from younger women. Obviously, that changes based on education level and socioeconomic status, but it's not necessarily an upward trend. I don't know if you, within Kenya, in your own personal capacity, if you've seen progress, and just attached to that, if you were to say someone who wants to get into this space in terms of activism, what would be the 2 things that you would want them to do in terms of moving the needle?
So I would base that, of course, on the cultural and social norms, again, that normalize gender-based violence in terms of it's okay to discipline a woman, right? So it goes to that. But in terms of, am I seeing progress? Sometimes. And I would say that on 2 fronts. Number 1, I applaud the organizations and the individuals that are doing everything they can to push back against social norms, whether it's the training, it's the advocacy, it's the campaigns, it's the holding leaders accountable. In my personal space, so we work at the community level with women in chamas. Those are the women in the merry-go-rounds. So we work heavily with them. And they come together, of course, to pull resource together. But we work with the leadership of the chamas, right? Are they aware in terms of how they would respond to a survivor within the chama? Because while you're coming to pull money together to take your child to school, to take your, to go pay a hospital bill and everything, gender-based violence could be one of the reasons your member is not even able to pay their arrears, right? So are you aware of the preventive mechanisms? How can you support a survivor within your own chama as opposed to just discussing money matters? But then what has astounded me before is, especially in the rural settlement, we've seen also women who wear pain as the badge of honor, where you're being told, respect this woman because whatever they've endured in marriage, just respect them, So wearing that pain as the badge of honor, then what does that do to the members that you're actually leading within your space, while someone is coming to talk about emotional violence, but because we put so much premium on physical violence, then we minimize emotional violence, even though it comes with a lot of even psychological harm. So I have also been able to see the normalization again of emotional violence, because you see, you can see the internal wounds, yet emotional violence is the foundation of all forms of violence. Your first heart before you even think about killing someone, and then you soak in that pain. You see? But then majority of the members that we work with, they'll rush to support someone who's going through physical violence, but then you will see someone simmer in their emotional violence, and then, in their emotional trauma and emotional violence. Then once they have high blood pressure, whether they have cancer or they have diseases, is when they start tracing it back, to, they have been enduring these for quite some time. But also, majority of the survivors not reporting. So there's a stigma that comes with reporting, but also not reporting. And by the time someone dies, there's no record, you see? So now you're trying to hold someone to account, but there's no record, right? And the witnesses are not willing to sometimes testify, but it's to even encourage whatever you're going through, just report. That OB number that you have could save your life tomorrow, or you're trying to defend yourself and you kill someone, that OB could just save you. Because we've seen cases where someone had like 7 OBs, and that's like, it lessened their sentence when they were trying to defend themselves, and their partner, they killed their partner while they're trying to defend themselves. But there was a record, like this person had been assaulting them for quite some time. So sometimes we don't even have this information, right? Yeah, so those are some of the gaps that I see, but I'm still hopeful, because people are not just sitting passively watching, and especially where we are at, even as a country where people are trying to speak up. Yeah.
Thank you. And you've mentioned in a way the stories we tell ourselves. It's true that as women, we're taught to be strong and endure, and we're often our own worst enemies. Also, if we are indirectly teaching our children, our sons, that some things are all right, and in that context, stories are quite powerful, right? So I'd like to then move to Sisanda in that respect and talk about her experience. Sisanda is based in South Africa, and I'd like to ask her, from your research and your studies and your observations, Sisanda, what role does the media play, the narratives that we see in the media, in shaping public perceptions about gender-based violence? Is that a positive role? If not, what should be done?
So I think when we are looking at a whole society approach to this really horrific issue, we cannot overestimate the role played by media as a tool to counter, but also a tool that perpetuates gender-based violence in two respects. So in the studies that I've done, I'd like to speak to two aspects. The one being the role of mainstream media as the platform that for many Africans is where many get their source of information from. Some studies put it at 40% or more of people's encounter with issues of law, with issues of crime and justice, are based primarily not having been part of that justice system, but from what they see in mainstream media. So it is really a powerful tool to teach people about crimes such as gender-based violence, and through that, it can perpetuate certain stereotypes, which then make it difficult to challenge gender-based violence. Another issue that we've seen in recent years is social media. And in this respect, I've done work on a concept called mob censorship of journalists, where you see people in online spaces using violent language to try and silence women journalists in particular, not through blatant threats, but through language that is really violent and crude, and that makes people, particularly women, stay off of these spaces. So we see problems with how media is used, both by professionals and the public, and that plays into the broader issue of gender-based violence. So in a study that I did that looked at TV news reports on gender-based violence, I found issues of stereotypes, where I think my previous panelist sort of alluded to it, where you've got narratives that make gender-based violence seem like a crime that's out there. It's someone who is wearing a short skirt, who was walking on the street, that then deserves this to happen to them. Or it is a stranger that is perpetuating it, when in actual fact, gender-based violence is in people's homes more than any other place. We also see issues of sort of using passive language when it comes to perpetrators, and the focus is on victims and making them be their own advocates instead of using these powerful platforms to hold perpetrators to account. And then in online spaces, you see shaming, a lot of shaming, where that is used to silence people who want to speak out, people questioning and using sort of mob comments when somebody voices an issue and that's related to gender-based violence, and then that causes people not to want to speak out. So in those ways, we see media really playing a negative role, but there's certainly a lot of potential for media used properly to then become a solution in respect to changing the narratives and in respect to telling different stories that can then allow accountability to happen. I'll give you one example that I saw in some data that I collected, which is something all journalists could do. There was an issue of gender-based violence, and the victim was sort of an ordinary South African who had documented what had been happening to her, but the criminal justice system just kept on failing her. And what she did was she shared her story with a journalist, and this journalist, armed with her camera and her microphone, which are very powerful, went to confront the actors in the justice system. And then there was sort of measures that were put in place. So something as simple as that, where we're not so much focused on these gruesome stories of the crimes that are being perpetrated, but we are focused on really holding people accountable and led to, in this particular case, a change. But that is just one case, and we need to see a lot more.
Thanks, Sisanda. So how do we encourage responsible reporting in these contexts? Is it through education? Is it through workshops? Is it through legislation? What, in your view, is a practical solution here?
So I think on two levels. I think the first could be at the level of us as ordinary citizens, where we see the power of social media to change narratives. We do not necessarily need mainstream media to be the only entity through which these stories are told, and where we can use our platforms to begin to speak about gender-based violence differently and focus on different aspects of the scourge. So I think that's the one, because what we see currently happening a lot with mainstream media is they tend to follow what people are creating on social media. So thinking of innovative strategies of telling different stories that then get picked up by mainstream media, and that could in turn shift the narrative. I think the second approach really would be training with journalists and other sort of mediators on how to tell sensitive stories, but also how to tell solutions-focused stories. So I think the use of sensationalism in the reporting is primarily because it gets audiences. Sadly, people are interested in these gruesome details, and a solutions-orientated approach is not often used. So if we train journalists on how to tell solutions-based focus stories, where the story is not about what has happened primarily, but on what can happen, and holding truth to account, that I think could be a powerful intervention.
Thanks, Sisanda. Yeah, the I guess incentive scheme in terms of clicks, getting clicks or views, is really harmful, because, as you say, a more sensationalist approach is more likely to draw people's attention. We've recently acted on a few large investigations, a couple of which were initiated through NGO action that was well-meaning, although the repercussions, and I don't know that this is the right forum to talk about it, because it has some macroeconomic repercussions. But one was, you may recall, the BBC undercover reporting on sexual harassment in tea plantations in Kenya. We were involved in that extensively from an investigation standpoint, and this is all public. And actually, the general counsel of one of the tea companies agreed to speak on one of our panels in Dubai, and I was very candid about it. So I can discuss it here. In that scenario, actually, Sisanda, if you look at, I don't know, this happened in East Africa, so maybe it wouldn't have been reported in South Africa, but it involved large brands like Lipton Tea and Unilever and so forth. So it did make international news, but the way they went about it was quite sensationalist, because they had women who actually were placed in situations of danger. They were undercover reporters who were trying to get employment within these tea companies. And in the course of that, the managers who were doing the recruitment process took advantage of them. And they were actually put in sort of a very complicated situation where they almost had to be rescued. But the point is that that type of reporting was done in a very crude way, unfortunately. So I think this is perhaps a helpful segue into a discussion that I'd like to have with Willie regarding the role that organizations have to play, private actors and NGOs as well, in terms of risk mitigation and safeguarding. This is really an area where, as ALN, we spend quite a bit of time just developing frameworks for policies and policy implementation. So, Willie, I know that you're actively involved in advising organizations on the implementation of safeguarding measures. So how do you build a framework to actively manage safeguarding? What are some of the key elements of that?
Thanks, Luisa. And thanks to the previous two speakers. I think that was a great background and just illustrated the size of the problem. Over the last 6-7 years, I think on our continent, we've seen a massive increase in cases reported, cases investigated. I don't think it is it's that there's an increase in these incidents. I just think that we are actually seeing some of the results of the awareness and the things that we're actually doing. So all is not bad. I think we are making progress. Slow, maybe too slow, but we are certainly making progress. I think another thing that I just want to say, Luisa, before I get to the specific compliance framework and so on and so forth, is there are good things happening. I mean, I know about a couple of programs. There's some analytics done in South Africa on GBV data, which they use to be more proactive. I know that there's actually, we signed up with a call center in South Africa on whistleblowing, but they also provide a 24/7 counseling line with professionals on the other side of the phone. And for me, the quick wins are people like ourselves. We can't leave it to anybody else, but people like ourselves to take some of the technology and some of the initiatives out of different countries and take it to Central African Republic, because it's a very different situation in Central African Republic and other countries. So I'm not saying that we're in a great spot, but I do think that there are good things happening, and we must just make sure that this group of people, we must encourage more people, and then if we stand together, we use technology, we use best practice, I think that we're actually in a good place. To your question, Luisa, in terms of building frameworks, I work with private entities, and this is not only this is a big issue for private companies as well. I mean, I don't want to mention too many examples, but there are 5 or 6 companies globally that went through safeguarding issues the last year. It's a massive reputational risk, and they understand that it costs them money, it costs them in terms of their shareholder value, and so on and so forth. So, and we are working with international NGOs in all these countries. Central African Republic, we've been to 15 countries the last year in terms of some of these investigations. Now, what are the things, 3-4 things that I think are critical in terms of building compliance frameworks around safeguarding? I think there are 4 or 5 things. The first thing is, it starts with governance. It starts with the leadership, the board of directors, the board of the INGO, to be deliberate and to have zero tolerance and to have real commitment to make a difference. It's not a tick box exercise. There must be a real commitment in terms of what you want to achieve. I think they have to put policies in place, and then there must be a real accountability from senior management, senior leadership, to make sure that we're trying to do the right thing, make sure we send the right message to our people, and make sure that we are proactive in terms of that. The second thing I think that's critical when you build some of these programs is to understand the risk. So we all say this is a significant risk on our continent, but do we really understand the risk? If we operate in 20 countries, the risk in one country is not the same as in another country. So we really if we want to manage it proactively, we have to understand the country risk, where we are, the type of operation, who's working for us, who are our partners. Those are all the things that are critical for us to understand. And it's only when you really understand the risk that you can build controls relating to how we're going to be preventative, how are you going to prevent it from happening, how are you going to, in other words, from a prevention point of view, raise awareness, make sure people know what's expected, what is not expected, how to report, all of those things, and work with our youth, and ensure that they know what is expected and not expected to change behavior. And then the second thing is, once you understand the risk, you'll be able to actually put controls in place to detect it better. In other words, do we have a whistleblowing facility? Do we have like I mentioned, what's in South Africa, one of the government departments that have like a 24/7 whistleblowing facility, but it's not only blowing the whistle, it's actually getting counseling. It's actually speaking to a professional to tell you what to do, how to manage it. What does evidence look like? I mean, all of these things people can coach you through. And then the last thing that I think is critical is, how do we respond to this? So I'm working with some international NGOs across the continent to see what is available in country. So if incidents happen, do we have adequate investigators? This is not the same investigation as a fraud investigation. It's totally different. So do we have the right skills to investigate? Do we have the right skills to support the individuals? Do we have the right medical facilities? Do we have the right medical awareness and people to assist? So there's a whole package of things that we must have access to when we respond to incidents. And I think, so for me, the main thing is a holistic approach. It's not like you do one thing and it's a silver bullet. It's really a holistic approach to make sure that organizations understand the risk, they have the commitment, and then they build controls around prevention, detection, and response within our organizations, Luisa.
Thanks, Willie. I think the point you make about institutionalizing these frameworks and these controls is really important, because one observation that I've made over the course of the last several years investigating these types of cases, and actually raised by the corporates themselves, is that whereas it is true that there's a huge reputational cost to adverse media in connection with these incidences, and that can lead to, for example, being dropped by certain investors or certain labels regarding your product meeting certain criteria. There is a short memory. Institutional amnesia sets in, both on the part of the stakeholders, but the organization itself, because it's expensive. It's expensive to actually actively, constantly monitor these issues. And one complaint, and actually this came from a general counsel himself, is that after the whole reaction to findings being reported in the media and managing stakeholders and losing revenue because they couldn't sell certain products in Whole Foods and other places, that lasted about a year. then they did a mea culpa, they apologized, they said they put systems in place, and then everyone forgot about it. So one risk that I see is that there's a box-ticking exercise that sets in quite regularly, and unless you are making it part of the life of the institution, and unless you have management who is really willing to tackle these issues, people fall back into their old patterns because it's resource intensive. I don't know if you have a response to that and a solution.
So Luisa, I want to say one thing in terms of technology. I think that we're getting to a stage. I mentioned data analytics. I mentioned the whistleblowing facility and how people get access to professionals immediately, real time. One other thing is social media. Now, I think we are in the initial stages, but we are getting indications of organizations using social media and picking up trends, picking up themes in certain areas of their businesses. So there will be a theme from social media in a certain area, and then I think that technology going forward is potentially going to help us to not predict, but to be on top of some of these things. I mean, I know about one or two organizations that's starting to do analysis on their networks in terms of communication, whether that's messages on email, whether that's messages on Teams and the likes, to screen for any indication of safeguarding, potential safeguarding red flags. So this is, I think, also positive because it's sending a message to people eventually that, listen, we are watching. If you're going to do something wrong, so I think it will change behavior, but I think it's early stages and technology, it's changing so fast, and I just think that we must embrace it, and it will help us against this risk and help us to manage it more proactively. Luisa?
Yeah, and I think really that you've hit the nail on the head in the sense that this risk is not often assessed as a risk to the organization. You made me think when it comes to data too, we have our own in-house data analysts and clients use them basically to code for reports that they want to get on the organization. And you look at what they produce and they look at sales, impact on marketing, P&L, etc. But there isn't reporting page on risks relating to safeguarding, for example. And so if the CEO perhaps were taking a look at also the numbers of sexual harassment incidents reported, trainings, etc., as part of the data, then it would be more present and it would just be a daily, a matter of course type of assessment that would be done. Maurine, moving on to you. Because you focus on financial inclusion and economic empowerment, particularly important would be economic empowerment for women. So what role does that play in terms of protecting the rights of the individuals and empowering them to mitigate the risk of gender-based violence?
I can say financial literacy is so important in preventing GBV. I can start with a story of yesterday I saw the news and it was about Turukana, lady in Turukana. She went and asked for her husband for food, and in the process of asking for food, that's where the husband hit her and died on the spot. So you can just imagine. So if she could have had that money and if she could have known how to feed herself, it could have avoided that violence. So finances is very important and it's very key. And I always advocate it to our women. And I can also give you another example is our generation, the Gen Z. They are instant.
Did you just include me in Gen Z? That's amazing.
Well, we are all Gen Z.
In spirit, yes.
In spirit. So you find the now generation, they want an instant. We call them instant food, microwave generation, instant coffee. So you find they just want instant money, and this one is luring them to vulnerability. And now you find those who have the money now luring the young generation and the young kids to come. If you do this for me, I'll give you the money. If you do this, so they go for the money, and it's now putting them into a bad situation. So financial literacy, it's a very key role to avoiding GBV, and I will advocate for that anytime, any day.
And how do you go about that advocacy? What do you focus on in terms of financial literacy? What do you teach them? Do you teach them to save? Do you teach them to invest, run their own businesses? What, in your view, is most important and most needed?
Yes, we teach them how to save, and in Uraia Trust we have working with a program of WVL, and we have other organizations under us where we reach the grassroots communities and the ladies. So we empower them on the laws, first on their rights in Kenyan constitution, what it's supposed to be done, what their rights, what can I say about the good and the bad. So we go through, we empower them financially, we give them opportunity, we give them platforms, we give them the voice. We have, for example, in Homa Bay, there was our current women rep. She was not known in the society, but through Uraia Trust, she was given that platform to stand, and there was no resources that she had given out, but we now stand in and help and aid in the campaign, and you give that platform where he or she can express themselves about what they can do, their agendas, and what they have for the people. So we give them a voice, I can say that.
And I've actually seen a number of studies of programs run by the UN and other NGOs in a number of African countries, Ghana, Nigeria, and others, that strongly suggest that once you teach people their rights, on both sides, you actually see a really significant decrease in these types of incidences. It's also the case that where there are gaps in the legislation, there is a very important role by private organizations in ensuring that, at least from their perspective, they are looking at best practices. The UK, for example, recently changed their legislation, and now organizations are required to implement measures to prevent sexual harassment and sexual violence. And in looking at that legislation, we were analyzing the Kenya position. And if you look at the Employment Act, for example, there isn't such a requirement. There are certain obligations by the employer in addressing issues once they have happened and disciplining the people who breach internal policies, but there is no obligation expressly in the act by employers to prevent situations where that could be pervasive. So for organizations, there's a responsibility, I guess, to be at the forefront when there are gaps. Bina, do you have any comments? I know you said you had. This intersects a little bit with what Sisanda talked about, but do you want to add anything with regards to the impact of the stories that we tell of the offenders and the survivors in how, when you're doing your activism?
I think Sisanda gave a very good background because also what I've also seen in our own media here in the country is how offenders play a very passive role in the stories that we tell, and also how that influences how the public discusses gender-based violence stories. And I think for me, I remember especially during COVID, there were very many cases of teenage pregnancies. So I can give like 2 examples. So I think one of the reports said that in Machakos, we had 3,000 teenage pregnancies. So first of all, when you sleep with a minor, it's defilement, right? Literally. So when you read a story, and I remember when these stories were airing across our big TV stations, there was Machakos at 3,000 teenage pregnancies. No, 4,000. There was Kilifi at 3,000 teenage pregnancies. And the conversation went, oh, the church is not doing enough. Parents are not spending a lot of time at home with their children. And I think, I was just listening in, and I'm thinking, number one, when we frame stories that way, then we're not discussing the pertinent issue, right? We're talking about 3,000 teenagers. So ideally what we are saying is that we have 3,000 defilers, 3,000 rapists in Kilifi. You're saying 4,000 teenagers are pregnant. So we're talking about 4,000 defilers, 4,000 offenders, 4,000 rapists. Imagine if you read a story that there are 4,000 rapists in Nairobi. You're looking at the next man as a potential offender, right? Because the story is 4,000 offenders in Nairobi County. So even within your ward, you're already wondering, number one, why are we having those many offenders in Nairobi? What is this power imbalance? Why do you feel like you need to exert your power this way, right? But because the story was framed more to focus on the victim, then we began discussing how we can keep the victim safe, right? But we are doing so much. Women, men, children, we are doing so much to stay safe, and it will never be enough if we don't discuss the systemic issues, the structural issues, the behavior issues. And lastly, I think for me, one of the stories that made me so sad, I think, was a story for Wangeshi. This was the medical student who was hacked to death by a young man who traveled all the way from Thika with a panga in the bag, and then waited for her outside the university and hacked her to death. But even how that story was told, it was medical student hacked to death, right? So again, the offender is missing in how we are framing that story. But again, it's also how we humanize the offenders, right? So afterwards, the story was that the offender was a teetotaler. Does it mean a teetotaler cannot rape, cannot kill? You see, do we have a particular image of an offender? Do we have offenders looking a certain way so that we can look out for offenders? So when we say that the offender used to go to church every day, does it mean people are not assaulted even in church? Or just because someone goes to church, they cannot assault someone? So I think also the humanizing of the offenders later on also determines how we are discussing stories about the offenders. So there's still so much when it comes to how we frame the stories, because you see, even social media and the media are entry points in terms of you understanding that while your world was okay today, something somewhere happened that was not right. Yeah.
It's absolutely right, and I guess the stigma associated with it, which also prevents people from even vocalizing the active part of that action. Go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot one thing that is so important also to the work that we are doing. I think lastly for me would be in the political arena. anytime we also see people, the stampedes and all that, we talk about collateral damage, and those are human beings. During campaigns, we have so many people who lose their lives just so that we can have the leaders that we see. And the fact that we don't put faces to them, that as well is a gap in terms of how we report those stories, whether it was a stampede or something. And I'm saying that just to circle back to the first point that I said. Personally, the first time I ran for office, I was 22. I was on the ballot at 22. And the first time I experienced political violence, it was insane. There was no help at the police station because, number one, the question was, which political party are you in and which area were you in? And that particular area, is it for political party X? Which shocked me because I was so vulnerable at the time, given the magnitude of the violence I had faced in the political campaign at the rally. But then again, going to the party, we didn't have a sexual harassment policy. You see, we didn't have any guidelines within the political party in terms of even how to handle this. So even if a member of the same, even if you're assaulted with a member of the same political party that you belong to, how do you deal with that if you don't have any guidelines? And even when you do a legal analysis of the policies that political parties have, you'll find majority of them are inadequate to even respond to the new trends of gender-based violence that we are currently experiencing, right? That is one. But then I think also even with our Cybercrime Act is not expansive in terms of the new forms of gender-based violence that we are talking about, that especially majority of the women and girls face in the social media terrain, whether it is revenge porn. How do you even preserve that data? When you face that, how many of us are even aware of how to go about that? Someone has shared this information about you. What do you do? The police, are they trained enough to understand how to deal with that? And I mean, how to preserve that particular information. So I think those are some of the gaps that I also see. Thanks.
Yeah, and those are at a global level. I think revenge porn has been very difficult to prosecute in many countries, and now you're looking at deep fakes, right? For example, in Spain, there was a massive scandal of teenage boys using deep fakes involving their female classmates, and the police were struggling in terms of how to address it because there is a gap in the legislation. Here, I think the importance of grassroots is super significant. We've seen it play out in the context of communities actually fighting enforcement in situations where there's proof that there has been violence of some type and an organization has attempted to involve the police. The elders of the community have actually stopped the process and have preferred to resolve the situation by offering, for example, cattle or mediation, etc. And so this becomes just an economic trade, right? And barter. So there's a constant conflict between traditional forms of conflict resolution and actual enforcement of crimes. And there is a big disconnect. I think as lawyers, we have the responsibility to try and bridge that gap. We try through a lot of our pro bono efforts, for example, to support victims in these scenarios, but it's difficult unless you're sitting on the police, on the prosecutors, ensuring that files are not getting lost and people are not getting bribed. It's very time intensive. I was told by Rutendo that actually I probably don't have a lot of time left, but if anyone has any question, well, first, before we get there, do any of my panelists have any final words before we get into questions? Maureen, anything you'd like to share?
In the part of the gaps, we had an opportunity to go to Garissa to do an activity on wellness, on human rights defenders, and it was so overwhelming how the human rights defenders has history, and so overwhelming, like they wished to solve the situation, but they can't. And then there was a gap where I felt it about the rape cases in children in Garissa, and how it was being solved. It was not even reaching to the law enforcers, because the culture now comes in where the mother and the child goes to the elder, the sheikhs, and then when the persecutor was being persecuted there, it's the persecutor is paying the elder the money, and full stop. There's no voice for the mother and the child on how she was violated. There was no psychological support. There's no anything. That was a sad situation for me, and I don't know how we can even bridge that gap between now the voice of the victim and reaching to get justice. Yeah.
Sisanda?
I think for me, what I'd really like to stress is that the way we talk about gender-based violence really matters. And the stories that we tell about it really matter. We've seen lots of societal scourges that have changed over time because the stories that we have accepted about them have changed. So it may seem trivial to be talking about words. Do we talk about pregnant teenagers, or do we talk about rapists who've raped children? But really, in the long run, when we change the kinds of conversations we have, we will change the values that we espouse when it comes to this. I mean, I am even of the opinion the term gender-based violence conceals so much. You know, it's so vague, and it doesn't really highlight who the issue is about, which is the men perpetrating this violence against women and children. So even thinking about ways to change that term in our advocacy, so we foreground really what the issue is.
Thank you. And yeah, I suppose sometimes you forget how things have changed. Recently, I was watching a movie with my oldest daughter, who's 13. Just a movie that was very popular in the 90s, I suppose, the Goonies. And I was shocked at some of the visuals. It's something that obviously didn't raise eyebrows at the time, but how they portray maybe 15, 16-year-old in the movie was shocking to me. I almost wanted to pause and skip ahead. And that would not be permissible in this day and age. So there is progress in that respect. Willie, before we move on to questions, do you have any final comments?
So, Luisa, I think it's a call to action. I mean, if you look at this panel, we're so diverse. I mean, we're dealing with frameworks, compliance, private sector reputation, and so on and so forth. And the other speakers are dealing with media, social media, grassroots. I just think that we all have to come together and join forces and see how we can assist not only one another but our communities and roll it out across our continent.
Thank you. I'd like to now open it up to questions either from the crowd here or those online. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, thank you. My name is Esther. I'm from Women in Real Estate Kenya. And I want to echo what has been said about the prevalence of sexual harassment in the workplace. At our organization, we have conducted a survey on the prevalence of sexual harassment in the workplace, and we found that about 60% of women in the built environment have experienced some form of sexual harassment, and of those, 61.8% of them did not report, and 62.5% of them were not aware of any policies against sexual harassment in the workplace. So as an organization, what we're trying to do is we're trying to talk to the regulatory bodies to include sexual harassment prevention in their code of conducts. But there have been some sort of resistance, and it's not being taken up really well. So my question would be, for that high-level policy, makers, basically, what is the best way to communicate the urgency of sexual inclusion of sexual harassment policy in the professional code of conduct. Yeah, thank you.
So can I ask what prompted that survey?
What prompted the survey is seeing that the construction industry is very male-dominated. So we sought to find out whether really that is an issue, and from our survey, it emerged as a really prevalent issue. Yeah.
Okay. So I think from a legislative standpoint, of course, law firms, especially those committed to doing work beyond just billable work such as ourselves, obviously play a significant role. From an institutional standpoint, Willie, I don't know if you'd like to comment with suggestions on how to build a policy framework.
So Luisa, yeah, I mean, it's not only that sector. I mean, if you look at the hotels, the entertainment, hospitality sector, it's same thing. I mean, there was a recent survey in that sector, exactly the same results. And I'm convinced that if we go to the other sectors, it will be exactly the same. We've done a lot of training in the fast food industry, for instance, and the results exactly the same. So I think that it's time that we must get together in terms of industries, and we must lobby. To your point, Luisa, I mean, we as a firm, with the ALN Academy and so on and so forth, I do think that there's some room for making sure that regulators, making sure that certain sectors, sector groups, we've got CAM, we've got KEPSA, we've got so many organizations in Kenya, and it's raising awareness with the board of directors, raising awareness with the right people in those organizations to make sure that they take this seriously and they see this as a significant risk.
Certainly a risk.
Lost me there. The moment that they see this as a significant risk, I think we will see action, and then we as organizations can implement and so on and so forth. But we have to start raising awareness and making sure that they understand the significance of the problem.
And quite shocking is actually the reluctance to report, right? Because a majority of the people affected refuse to. I have seen, though, from a positive standpoint, at least from the perspective of the clients who come to us ask for help, a change in mindset in terms of how to react to that reporting. I started my career in New York, where sexual harassment is pervasive. In the US, it's no coincidence that the Me Too movement really started there. It's a huge issue in corporate culture. And every single instance that I am personally directly aware of people who try to report, the person who ended up leaving the organization was the woman, not the man. Oftentimes when this was raised, and there's a power imbalance, often the man was a partner or a senior manager and the woman was the recruiter or lower level administrative person. And when the management was questioned as to why things turn out that way, the response was, I remember shockingly one case was, well, he's great at driving revenue. So, you know, we made a choice. So they would pay out the women would get a settlement, they would leave the organization because it was untenable for them to stay, and the man would just get a slap on the wrist. I'm seeing change in that respect. The response is definitely different, and I think that's positive. Yes, actually, I think she was first, then we go back to the back. Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Valerie Wasa, and I'm a legal fellow at KICTANET, Kenya ICT Action Network, which is an organization that spearheads policy around ICT advocacy and research. So mine is more of a comment and a call to action. So a lot has been said in the panel discussion around the emerging areas of gender-based violence on TFGBV, that is tech-facilitated gender-based violence. And I would just like to shed light to some of the work that KICTANET is doing, and maybe if there's anyone here, this is me shamelessly plugging myself, please would like to collaborate more on this. So back in 2020, KICTANET did a research on the impact of technology on women politicians, especially around the election period. We've also recently conducted a research, and we've launched a report on the human rights context of women in the online space. And indeed, there's a lot that still has to be done around having express laws on TFGBV, which is tech-facilitated gender-based violence. So KICTANET, with the support of the UK High Commission, is conducting a research on the legal and regulatory gaps around tech-facilitated gender-based violence, so that we can have, first of all, we can have a marriage of the different laws, that is the Sexual Offences Act, the Cybercrime Act, the Children's Act, etc. And so if anyone is interested in that kind of work, would be happy to talk about that. And also I'd like to share about an opportunity that we are working on currently. We are working on having a lexicon of TFGBV in local languages. So there's a call for consultancy. So if anyone is an expert in the local languages and would be like to collaborate with us in being able to detect TFGBV in the local languages against women, I would like to invite you all on board. And then lastly, we have a mailing list that brings together more than 1,000 stakeholders, private sector, law firms, to discuss aspects of ICT policy. So this is our call to action to please join us as we join you to end online gender-based violence against women in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you for that intervention. Sounds like you're doing great work, and definitely a lot of areas for collaboration. Yes, the back. Oh, left. Rutendo, you're left first, and then you're right. No. Between the two gentlemen.
All right.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexander Otuka. I'm from Hosted in Africa. And there's something that Ms. Bina mentioned, that GBV is viewed as a women's issue and not a societal issue. And then also Mr. Willis mentioned that companies are worried about reputational risk. And that statement kind of worried me. In my organization, our philosophical underpinning is Ubuntu. My existence and well-being is tied to the existence and well-being of those around me. So it could never just be a women's issue, it's our issue together. And my question to the panel is, how do we move it from being a women's issue or a reputational issue into an issue that is an indicator of the company's health? Sometimes if you walk into a factory, you might see so many days, or hopefully 0 days, so many days since the last accident. And that's not for reputation or marketing. It's that factory and all the workers there taking ownership of no one being injured or losing their life is important to us in this space and not as a marketing issue. And how do we get companies to view GBV in that same light?
That's wonderful. I think the Ubuntu philosophy says it all. I'd like to invite our senior partner, Karim Anjarwalla, to comment on that, because he's very, very passionate about the significance of culture and that trickling down. Karim, putting you on the spot.
Thank you, Luisa. I think it's interesting to me how you can begin to get people to coalesce around. No one thinks of climate change, for example, as a issue for one part of society and not another. Right? Climate change is something that impacts all of us. And the question is, how did that happen? Right? How did we manage to build a global coalition around an issue such as climate change? I think that patriarchal approaches to the way societies are run are very deeply entrenched. They're cultural, they're religious, they go back millennia. And so ultimately, deconstructing the mind is what you're talking about, right? And deconstructing the mind is a long-term complex task, but only really can happen at speed if leadership at the top of an organization takes that issue as a central issue of culture, values, and accountability. And I think that that is probably not sufficiently acknowledged, and I would dare to say in many organizations you might have the code of conduct and you might have the manual, but you don't have the cultural buy-in at the top to make it meaningful. And so you then end up in the situation, Luisa, that you mentioned, for example, in the US, where they had all the manuals, right? And they had all the policies and everything that you could possibly want for paperwork, but no cultural depth to taking these issues seriously. So I think that's where the change has to happen. I also think that companies are now scored on their sustainability, right? At what point do we now score companies on metrics such as the prevention of GBV or workplace abuses? And I think more reporting, more statutory reporting, regulatory reporting around how companies deal with these issues might be one way of moving the needle on this issue. Yeah.
Thank you. And absolutely, good quality leadership, I think, is key. And that's why I call on Karim to speak, because the first thought that came to mind when you talked about your company's or your organization's philosophy of Ubuntu was that only works when it is embodied by the leadership. If it's just a slogan you have on your desk, nothing's going to change, right? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Kingori. I'm an advocate and a KU alumnus. My question is on the issue of basic education as a potential solution to this problem of SGBV. I think when we grew up in Kenya, we know that HIV studies was ingrained in our books from primary level all the way to the secondary level. But we don't have an equivalent on SGBV. And the question is what policy issues you would think would help us ingrain this as part of the subject. And also considering, I saw one thing on Twitter earlier this year that one of the CBC books said that a woman who wears a miniskirt exposes themselves to SGBV. And one parent was asking, how are we training our children that how they dress is what makes them a target? Do we see basic education as a solution to this? Thank you.
Absolutely, and actually a number of the programs that have been run in several African countries to tackle this have been run in schools, and they've been highly successful when they're done at sort of the elementary and middle school level. So education reform is crucial in my view and should include this as a topic of conversation. Do we? Oh, yes. I think final person in the room, and I don't know if we have anyone online. Oh, okay, final two.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sheila, and my question goes to Willie. He's talked about creation of whistleblowing facilities as a means of building frameworks. So as we create these whistleblowing facilities, what measures are we taking to protect the whistleblowers as well? Because no one will want to come forth, yet they're going to be retaliated. So I'd like to see clarification on that.
Thank you, Sheila. So Sheila, let me start off by saying a whistleblowing facility is not only a red telephone, like in a corner office, it's a strategy. So I started off by saying that if you build a framework, you need a holistic approach. So whistleblowing is probably the best way of detecting wrongdoing by a country mile. And that there's the statistics and so on and so forth. But it's a strategy. It's not only a facility. What I mean is there must be awareness around that. You must build credibility around it. So in other words, if there's a whistleblowing report, there must be an independent investigation. If there's wrongdoing, there must be action. And then obviously, you must set up the whistleblowing facility in such a way that you can protect the identity of whistleblowers. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but it's a variety of things that you have to get right. You have to build credibility in the facility. And once you have that, and actually to Karim's point, you have buy-in from the top. The top makes a decision that we will make sure we protect whistleblowers and so on and so forth. Then you'll have a credible facility that will be a very, very good tool to manage the risk that we're managing.
Final question in the room.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martha Bowen, a student at Kenyatta University awaiting graduation. Now that we are talking about safeguarding mechanisms against gender-based violence, it seems like it has developed to the extent that it includes even obstetric violence, where women experience violence in hospital. Gender-based violence against them has extended to the extent that even they cannot be able to access maternity care freely. So my question is, can we, in a way, include obstetric violence within the mechanism of safeguarding women against gender-based violence?
Thank you. I think that goes to Willie's comment about having a sort of a sector-wide approach to this, and if in the healthcare sector this is a particular risk, it's something that needs to be tackled. I think this is part of the whole society discourse that we have on call to action. Just looking at this room, which is relatively small, there's such a variety of expertise and perspectives. I think the point is to continue talking about this. Wherever you can move the needle, you should do so. Speak about it and collaborate. Please make connections today, because I think that there's a lot that can be done. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment.
I just want to comment something on what should be done. And in our Uraia Trust, we are practicing a strategic framework where outcome 3 is about Utu, doing the right thing at the right time when nobody is watching. So we are just advocating for Utu, humanness. That means humanness. And if we can just embrace Utu, it cuts across in accountability, in wherever we are. It will be the perfect solution to this.
I think so much has been said, and I'll just piggyback on what you're saying. Whatever one can do to move the needle. To some of us might be going to the streets like we always do. To others might be, speaking up from where you are. Other people might be writing about it. Others legislating. Others supporting survivors to access justice. I think maybe it's to encourage us that there's always something everyone can do. Always something everyone can do. Thanks.
Do we have any questions from the people online? All right. Well, I think that closes our session. I'd like to thank my panel. It was a very interesting session. I hope that we remain in touch and that you connect with some of the members of the audience. So thank you.
Thank you so much for making it. Thank you very much for being patient with all of my crazy emails. Really appreciate it. For just being with us today, we have a small token of appreciation that we'd like to give you as the ALN Academy for coming today. And we hope you stay in touch with us and you continue to work with us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so, so much. Rebecca.
Thank you so much, members of the panel. Well, before I introduce the next person and also shepherd our way into the next part of this evening, I can't help but think about the stories that we tell ourselves. And, you know, sometimes when you're watching the 9 p.m. news cycle and you hear crime of passion, lovers spat, and all of those things and how they desensitize you about the issues of gender-based violence. And yeah, and today we are all the better for the session that we've had and the enlightenment we've received as a result of that. Now, the next section is trying to, you know, open the curtain, so to speak, onto 2025 and the activities of the ALN Academy. And in this regard, I have the singular pleasure of introducing Mr. Karim Anjarwalla, man who needs no introduction. He is a founding member as well as a board member of the ALN Academy, spends way too much time on ChatGPT and AI and technology, but is also very pithy and very, you know, he's very in touch with rule of law issues. Throughout the year, he's been part of many of our sessions at the ALN Academy. I particularly remember him being a moderator in the session on practical approaches to peace and democracy, which happened in the backdrop of the, you know, of the protests that were going on at the time. And well, I'd like to introduce you. Karim, please come to the, Kimplal, please come to the podium. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rafael. It's a great pleasure to be here. And let me also just thank the previous panelists for a really fascinating panel. So the thing with making a speech in December is that you're at a crossroads, right, of reflection and projection. And I want to invite you to consider a simple but powerful question, which is what kind of future do we want to create? It's not just a rhetorical question, it's a call to action, because the future we want for Africa, one that's inclusive, fair, and driven by justice, will not create itself. We must imagine it first, and then we must build it. And most critically, we need to connect the threads that hold it together. And for 2025, that's what the ALN Academy's focus is all about. And as we close this event tonight, I want to introduce you a little bit to the vision that will guide us into the next year and beyond. The world is obviously transforming before our eyes, faster, more complex, and crucially, undeniably digital. We have seen, for example, our Chief Justice complaining about the fact that she's being bullied online. Now that's quite something, right? You know, there are obviously arguments around the judiciary and its state and so on, but the fact that somebody of the stature of the Chief Justice can raise that issue as an issue for debate speaks of itself. But these issues of complexity, fast change, and the digital change present a profound challenge for Africa, but also a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We know, for example, how mobile technology has revolutionized banking. We know how AI is transforming healthcare with predictive diagnostics saving lives in remote communities, or drones carrying drugs to places otherwise inaccessible for regular medical facilities. and entire industries from agriculture and, dare I say, the legal sector are being reshaped before our eyes. Yesterday I was at a session, and I think it was Thomas who told us about the risks of even law lecturers reading lecture notes from ChatGPT or Wikipedia and so on and so forth, right? Real risks, even to academia, let alone, because we always thought that the focus was on students writing essays from ChatGPT. One had never thought that it might be lecturers actually producing lecture notes from ChatGPT. But as this change progresses so quickly, the question is, will we be spectators or will we be architects of the change that we want to see? And at the ALN Academy, we've chosen to be architects, and we want to invite you today to join us on this architectural journey of redefining in a positive way our future. So for 2020-25, our focus is clear. We want our conversations to be big, okay? We want to think big, we want to inspire big change, and we want to move people towards big, bold action. We want to shape the world of technology, AI, and the rule of law in Africa, not as separate threads, but as an integrated fabric of progress. And we want to bring ideas and actions alive. And we know that we can't do this alone. We need young people particularly, whose energy and ideas will shape the continent. We need institutional partners who share our passion for impact. And we need people like you, leaders, thinkers, and change makers, to stand with us, to challenge us, and to push us to do more. And I think this is probably the most important point. We want to break silos. The legal profession cannot be an island separate from the rest of society. Lawyers, technologists, policymakers, educators, we have to be in a conversation together, enriching and learning from each other and influencing each other. That's how we will weave the threads of Africa's rule of law and digital future. But this all sounds positive, but we know there are massive challenges ahead. I think the greatest challenge is what I call the hardware versus software debate. Right? I think in Africa over the last 20 years, we've been actually quite good at building hardware. What do I mean by hardware? I mean new roads, new bridges, new expressways, new power plants, infrastructure in all its various facets. Where we have evidently failed is in software. Okay? The rules of how Ubuntu, the rules of how we should be dealing with each other, the rules of how government should deal with us and how we should deal with government, right? The way to do things is where I think we have failed. And we've, in fact, I would posit, in some ways gone backwards rather than actually gone forward. So as we've built physical infrastructure, I think our societal infrastructure, what I call our software, needs serious, to continue the analogy, needs a serious upgrade. And so this is something we need to deal with, right? I think our skills gap, to come to a second challenge, our skills gap are great. Our youth are our greatest asset, but they're only an asset if they're educated and globalized. And I think the risk of this new digital age is that we actually fall further behind, not push further ahead compared to youth on other continents. There are big ethical dilemmas that we need to face. We are in a surveillance society. Okay? This is a huge risk for all of us. We have all the rubric of data protection, but is our data really protected when it matters? I think that's a very good question we should all be asking. Okay? And there are many news articles that tell us that telecom providers, for example, routinely breach our data privacy in ways that are incredibly powerful, dangerous, and meaningful. Right? These are as yet not validated, but there are at least legitimate grounds for us to question whether our data is well protected in ways that really matter. Okay? And so how will we resolve this the balance between national security, for example, and our right to privacy, our right to security, our right to not be surveilled. Okay? We need really clear regulation and enforcement. And finally, you know, we can't do this in 54 countries in 54 different ways, right? There really does need to be a coalescing in Africa around AI and data governance, which I think is far from happening. I think we are still, governments are still operating very much in silos so far as this is concerned. So these are the challenges, and I think they're really big and important, and that's where we want to act. It's in that field that we want to act to help overcome these challenges. And so this brings me back to you, to each and every one of you here in the room, but also online. Our futures, the rule of law futures, our digital futures, should not be written by other people. Currently, they're being written only by other people. Okay? Our digital futures today are not being written in Africa. They're being written somewhere in Palo Alto, maybe in China, elsewhere. Okay? How do we change that? If you're a young person passionate about technology, the rule of law, or just building a more just society, this is your moment. If you're a person currently watching your mobile phone, please give me 1 minute of your attention at this time and stay away from your technological device. You don't have to wait. That got a few people looking up. Thank you. I know you, I've seen you. You don't have to wait for permission. Join our network, bring your ideas, and shape our agenda. Okay? If you're an institutional partner, a leader in your field, or a representative of a business or an NGO, I ask you to think about what it means to be a partner with purpose, not just for financial support, but for shared impact. We want partners who think as boldly as we do, who are as restless as we are for change, and who are relentless in the pursuit of progress. And if you're a lawyer, a judge, or a policymaker, my challenge to you is step outside your silo. The rule of law is not just for courtrooms and contracts, it's for every corner of society touched by technology. I was so saddened by the data you shared about the, on the gender-based violence in the built environment. It's just remarkable to me that 60% of those surveilled reported some form of discrimination, sexual discrimination or violence at the workplace. We need your voice, your perspective, your wisdom in spaces where you might not have gone before. And I think the events of June and July, I was at an event yesterday where some of you were present, and I want those of you who feel despondent about the events, the outcome of June and July, to just reflect on this. Everyone said in 2012-13 that the Arab Spring had failed. Okay? But in fact, what the events of Syria tell you that no, they haven't failed, right? It just depends on your time of reference, right? Syria tells you that the seeds of the spring were laid in 2011, 2012. And throughout the Middle East, actually, you are seeing very positive change in governance, in the rights of women, in democracy, right? In accountability and transparency, okay? Even in autocratic societies, right? You're seeing those changes now happening. The fact that women in Saudi Arabia can now drive and have equal access in the workplace and so on and so forth, that's a direct result of the Arab Spring, okay? No mistake about it. It's not the result of an enlightened new prince. He was reacting to the events of the Arab Spring. So for those of us who were involved in the Kenyan Spring, right, and feel downcast or dejected about it, my point is don't, because change is hard. It takes time, and you need to be persistent and relentless, right, in that approach. In 2025, then, we will be hosting dialogues, workshops, forums to break down these barriers between all of us who approach these issues in different ways. We want to bring young people, but also older people. I need to say that because together with policymakers, educators, technologists, innovators, we want to bring you all together. We will connect fields that have never been connected before in a meaningful way and weave together the threads of Africa's future. why does this matter? Why are we so focused on this? And why is a corporate law firm involved? I think, any of you asking that question? Yes. Right, okay. Right, why is a corporate law firm involved in all of this? I think we're involved because when the tide falls, we all can't swim. And when the tide rises, we all swim, right? And so I think it's incumbent on us. The rule of law, human rights don't only belong to those who are in the NGO world, civil society, human rights defenders. All of us have to play our part in that, okay? And I think that's why we're involved. I think we have something to say. We may not be the most powerful voice, we may not be the most relevant voice, but we have something to add, okay? And so that's why we're focused on this, and we have resources, we have network, we have access to research and know-how that we can bring to the table. Every shift in human history has been defined by those who shape it, not those who watch it, right? If that was true, I would be the world's best footballer, right? Or the world's best cricketer, because I'm an absolutely amazing commentator on football and cricket, right? But you wouldn't put me in the 15th 11, let alone the first 11 of any reasonable team. Africa has missed too many opportunities in the past, okay? From the Industrial Revolution to the digital boom. But this moment is different, and we know that we are capable of leapfrogging, right? We have seen leapfrogging in action in many fields on our continent. So we are not too late. I would say we're just about on time this time. And the world is watching how Africa navigates this next wave of AI, technology, and its impact on the rule of law. I think we can lead in this field, not just in fintech or agriculture, but in the ethical governance of AI. And I know Alexander from HIA, Hosted in Africa, is very focused specifically on this issue. I think we can lead in trying to understand how to integrate law and technology, and in shaping a digital future that works for all, not just the few. Many of you may have followed what has happened in Australia. The social media, the planned social media ban for children under 16, right? I know it's not yet implemented. They've given, I think, that the tech companies a year to implement this ban, but it's remarkable in its own way. I'm not entirely sure about the balance between the rights of a parent and the rights of a state, okay? Because this is really very much the state dictating what can happen and what cannot happen. So there are good arguments on either side, I think, of that debate. But the fact is that a large Western democracy I've stopped using the word liberal anymore, by the way. Okay, I think it's a complicated expression, but a large Western democracy has taken the step of essentially banning social media from those under 16, right? It's a huge step, and I think there's something in that for the rest of the world to think about. So I think I've gone on a lot. So as I close, I invite you to think beyond this room, to think about 2025, and imagine the same event 1 year from now, because you will surely be invited, and we hope very much that you're here a year from now. Imagine young people standing on the stage, sharing success stories about how their ideas became a reality. Imagine a stronger network of partners, companies, institutions, and people all working together to drive this change. And imagine legal and technological communities working side by side to build ethical, fair, and forward-thinking technology and AI systems. This is not a dream, okay? It's a plan, and we're trying to lay its foundation as we go. In a sense, we've let you into the launch of ALN's 2025 vision, and we stand ready to connect ideas, connect people, and hopefully connect a future and weave a positive future for all of us together. And as I close, just two things. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We don't underestimate the effort it has taken for you to make the time to attend. We were very grateful for that. I'd like to thank the amazing team within the Academy. who help us drive this forward. The most quiet, but the most powerful within that is my partner, Aisha Abdallah. If you can just stand up, Aisha, so everyone can see you, those who don't know you. Yeah. I have the louder voice, but she has most of the action. So thank you, Aisha. And thank you to all the other members of the Academy team. Rutendo, who's here. Where are the others? Zephyr, right? Rebecca, where are you? Thank you. Thank you so much. I know it's a difficult job at times, working with difficult people like me to get us on time at places and so on and so forth, so we really appreciate it. Let me leave you just with this. Every thread matters. Okay? Every thread is essential to the fabric of Africa's future. From the ideas of the young coder in Nairobi to the policymaker in Abuja, the collaborations that we form in this room today and in the subsequent conversations hopefully will weave a much bigger tapestry. So let's have fun, let's weave it together, and let's make a date in our diaries for the second week of December 2025, where we can catch up and see how we got going in the last year. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim. It was very intentional that Karim went before us because Karim has inspired all of you. And our job is essentially to tell you exactly how to be action people right after the inspiration that Karim has provided us. So, in 2025, we want to be very intentional about this theme, or rule of law, AI and tech in Africa. And we want to partner with all of you and collaborate. And to do this, we'll need several things. First of all, we want greater interaction with all of our institutional partners. And so we thought today it would be a great day to have you in person, so you see that we're serious about you, and we want you to be serious about us and what we're doing. The other thing we want extremely is to collaborate with you, so I really liked all the shout outs. Because we want to collaborate, we want that kind of energy, and collaboration for us means participating in our engagements, inviting us also to your engagements. It means providing speakers where you think some of our activities are relevant to you, and we will share our events calendar. Collaboration for us means helping us output the thought leadership required for us to be right on time at this time. So that's very, very important for us. We want to break those silos by letting you know that as our institutional partners, you're not just corporate lawyers or in a corporate law firm. You are on the ground, you're doing different things. And these are complementary values to us, and they matter. So please reach out to us. We should be sharing a barcode with you soon, so you can tell us exactly how we can communicate with you and how we can maintain this relationship. And lastly, of course, your support, your sponsorship in many different ways. Time, financial, resharing and sharing. I see a lot of our institutional partners, they do a lot of the marketing for us. So we really appreciate your interaction on our social media pages. But the important thing for all of this is that the kind of noise that we want to make in 2025 for the rule of law and tech and AI in Africa, we can't make it alone. We're going to rely a lot on you, and we are hoping that you want to make as big a noise as we want to make. So thank you so much for coming, for sticking it through, for seeing what we're about. And when you see our emails, please hop on the bandwagon, and we'll welcome you. Thank you so much, everybody, to all our speakers. Aisha, Karim, so appreciated. We have a mixer outside, so you can breathe, stand up, talk, network amongst yourselves, speak to any of the ALN Academy ambassadors about how we can approach our 2025 relationship. Asante sana. Goodbye. So you may all stand up now and go to the terrace. Dismissed. Kindly scan the barcode for you to let us know how we should have a relationship with you in 2025. Please, please. The Slido number is 365-4508. That's 365-4508. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. All right.